Well, we hope to be at your service in the concluding panel tonight on the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Revised Codes of Good Practice, brought to you by Nyosi Enterprise and Supply Development. All this week, we've been talking about the revised codes, some of the key elements, and I really think it's fair to say that all businesses will need to understand how these amended codes work and begin planning and revising their strategies around BEE, because although there's no legal obligation to comply, it's certainly an important factor when you look at your ability to successfully tender for any government or public sector work, to obtain licenses, and just increasingly in terms of the shared values principles as they are espoused in the new King 4 codes as well. Now, we've heard from the Deputy BEE Commissioner, and there's certainly going to be a crackdown on fronting practices as well, and we've covered some aspects of the key elements, things like skills development, management control, and enterprise and supply development. And tonight we're going to tie it all together, and that's why I said we're going to be in your service. We're going to try and present some solutions and help you think a little bit more strategically about win-win outcomes with BEE. And it's a great pleasure to welcome to tonight's panel. Around the table, I've got everyone scattered a little bit. So to my immediate right, I've got Lianne, Director of the Association of BBEE Professionals and the CEO of Siaka Implementation Partners. Good to see you again, Lianne.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next to you is Lianne Levenstein, the CEO of EconoBEE. Lianne, great to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
And opposite me and next to you is Varushka Pillay, who's in studio for a change. Varushka, we spoke on Monday, Director of Corporate and Commercial at Decker Hoffmeyer. So good to see you.
You too, Michael. Thanks for having me.
And Evan Jones returns, sitting next to you, Portfolio Manager of the Nyosi Enterprise and Supplier Development Fund. Evan, we're just going to get you an office here, I think. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael.
Now, Dion, kick us off tonight, and perhaps just place our BEE policy within the global context, because there's this the pervasive myth that the policy is unique to South Africa, and it clearly isn't.
No, certainly not. I think that really the name is misleading in certain senses. For South Africa, it's very much about being an equalizing policy in respect of economic transformation and social transformation. But if we look to the rest of the world, China has an insistence of 51% ownership. Saudi Arabia has similar instances. The Australian Indigenous Economic Development Policy talks about procurement from indigenous-owned businesses. The UK restricts certain import and export incentives based on local ownership, and 23 African countries have subscribed to some level of localization. So if we remove the concept of black economic empowerment and think locals, think the obligation we have as businesses to ensure that we are supporting local jobs, local purchasing, and ergo local manufacture as a means to grow our local economy and see South Africa succeed, then that's a global imperative for most governments.
Thanks so much. I believe we've now got Gary Hawkins, the Managing Director of I Love Coffee, on the line as well. Gary, I'm so sorry, we forgot about you because you're on the phone.
No problem.
all the way from Cape Town. I hope you're keeping well.
No problem. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Lianne, following up from that and looking at this imperative to really support local businesses and understanding the key drivers, what are you seeing from a lot of your clients and a lot of people who approach you and their attitudes towards BBEE?
Yeah, well, the attitude is quite interesting because that's changed quite a bit since the old codes to the new codes. So I think what's happening a lot in the industry is some companies, when the new codes first came out, and remember that was in draft in 2012 and then in a final version in 2013, started looking at it and started saying, this is too difficult, it's too much for me to get a certificate, and basically put their hands in the air and gave up on the whole process, which was obviously very negative and not the actual point of transformation. What I'm starting to see now, though, is all of those clients and all of those companies who gave up years ago are actually coming back. They're actually starting again to get a BEE certificate. On Friday, there was a very, very big announcement, and that announcement was along the lines of empowering supplier status. And previously, a lot of those companies who I said gave up because the points were too difficult, the targets were too high, and because they could never ever be an empowering supplier. Now that that empowering supplier status is effectively on hold and isn't as important, a lot of people are a lot of companies are starting to look at it again. And obviously from the customer point of view, because the new codes are more difficult, customers are putting a lot more pressure onto their suppliers to get a certificate. So it's quite simple. You said it earlier. If you want to grow the economy, if you want to get business, you need to give your customer a B certificate.
Well, that's encouraging to hear, and we touched on it a little bit last night, Evan. Varushka, I want to unpack ownership. Let's begin there and look at some solutions here, because I'm sure many will be aware that the new codes place far more emphasis on the ownership element. It's one of the priority elements, and without any black shareholding, I think the most a company can achieve under the new codes is a level 5, and that's if you claim virtually every other point available. So it's so important. It's a priority element. How does one decide on the best shareholding structure? What are some of the popular options out there?
So I think you've basically got the following options. You could have as a BE shareholder black business. You could have your employees, or you could have a broad base of shareholders, or a combination of those. In deciding what is most suitable for the business, of course, one must look at what the business needs are, what is compelling with regards to actually direction, how also the way in which the transaction will be done, how will it be funded, or what are the requirements there. And so in my experience, we see companies really going one or a combination of those routes, and it's all really driven by business need.
It really does start there, even with what the shareholders' objectives are. And I mean, from a strategic level, that should be your first question when you approach the ownership issue.
Yeah, I think if you look at the codes, for me, and my speciality has always been product development. When I develop a product, I often look at what objectives I'm trying to get to. And so I think it's very important for companies to adopt a strategic approach and say, right, you know, if I want to compete in the industry that I'm in, what is a realistic BE objective? Every single rating or verification agent or consultant should be able to say, right, if you earn so many points, you're going to get to this level. If you earn so many points, you're going to get to that level. So they should be able to guide you with how many points you need to get to a certain level. Once you know what that is, you can then start almost working backwards and saying, right, if I need to get to that level, what are the things within my control that I can change? And obviously, as with any development cycle, there'll be some hurdles that are easy to jump through, and there'll be some that are progressively harder. And I think it's important. I think the point that Lianne made about the codes being difficult, I think they are difficult, but sometimes, you know, it's like eating an elephant. You have to start with one bite at a time. So you really have to try and analyze. If you take a strategic approach, determine where you want to get to, and then start unpacking it, I do think that you can. It's obviously not without. You do have to apply effort and insight and get people to help you and stuff. But you can get to your objectives. And I think what we're starting to see, which I always thought would be the case, is that the government, specifically DTI, are faced with the risk that if they make it too difficult, people will opt out. So the empowering supplier is an example of some to make changes. And because we are all in that space, I think I can speak for everyone in the panel and say that the majority of companies that I deal with certainly are very interested in trying to achieve not only just the codes but the goals and objectives.
And Gary, I'm going to bring you in here as someone who's not a consultant or involved in the codes from that perspective, but is certainly a beneficiary as a small business. And just tell me a little bit more about I Love Coffee, because it's just such a remarkable concept.
Well, thank you. So, in a nutshell, I Love Coffee is in the disability space. We're a deaf-run coffee shop. All our baristas are either deaf or hard of hearing. And really, the idea of the business came from trying to address unemployment amongst the deaf community, and we're looking at about 5% of the population that just don't have access to really decent education, very poor chance of any sort of tertiary education, and then they're just faced with a great deal of unemployment. So for us, that was the starting point, but it also it gave us opportunities by working with the codes to provide a solution that actually is quite simple to engage with. So, we looked at all aspects of the business, and, we are busy, though we're relatively new business, we are now starting to develop learnerships and accredited training so that we can access skills development funding, which obviously has a benefit back to the company.
Yeah.
And then we look at and we want to be able to set up little coffee kiosks or coffee businesses inside head offices, which of course can be funded through enterprise development. And then once we're more established, and we'll develop our own coffee brand, that's available as a supplier. And we are 51% black owned, and a large majority of that is disabled owned. So we're actually quite a simple sort of plug and play solution for companies looking to get points, but over and above that, we're just creating integration with the deaf community.
And it's a wonderful example of how the codes are now driving this sort of innovation in the marketplace. Dion, I want to come back to that point, though, the plug and play solution, because obviously when we talk about strategies, if you're a very large listed company, you can have an entire investment team working on putting a strategy together. If you're a smaller company, sometimes you think, well, I'd like to, but I'm overwhelmed. But there are plug-and-play solutions out there.
Sure. I think that, and I hear the word points moved around quite a bit in the conversation, and I think some of the problem lies in this obsession with points. Really what we need to be doing is saying, what is the intention of this legislation, and how do I make that work for me? So there are plug-and-play solutions. There are quick wins and easy ways for us to be compliant. But I think that when we stop worrying about the scorecard and we understand the underlying philosophy of transformation in this country is about an operating ethos. How do I have the most impactful impact on my stakeholders? And my stakeholders are my customers. They are my suppliers. They are my employees. And certainly they are the South African context. I always say to multinationals, if you want to benefit from operating in this country, then we need to be able to measure how this country benefits from you. If it becomes your operating ethos, the scorecard almost becomes redundant. It's a way for us to double check that we are doing the right thing and going in the right way, but really BE, if implemented accurately, talks about remove discrimination, make sure that your strategies are inclusive, be locally represented to your customer market, look like your customer base, make sure that you subscribe to the notion of in South Africa, otherwise why are you here? You're part of our problem and not our solution. And most importantly, address the issues of environmental and sustainability challenges at the same time, because those environmental and sustainability challenges, as they grow, follow an integrated reporting approach, and this also gives you BE points.
And it's codified in so many other things as well. The Paris Agreement, the King IV Code that's just come out. So it's good operating practice, and impactful impact. I think is double the impact. So you can use that word. That's fine. Lianne, when we look at it from that perspective, it certainly becomes a far more strategic conversation, but it also offers opportunities to develop new channels with which to access markets.
Yeah, 100%. When looking at your BE activities, it is about the points, but part of that as well is looking at how you can benefit. So there is a huge opportunity of getting into new markets. So if you do have, for example, the black shareholding, I'm not sure if Arushka is going to mention a bit of this later, but if you do have black shareholding, then that opens up a huge market because customers are looking to buy from companies who are black owned. They're looking to invest in enterprise development. They're looking to invest in companies who at the moment might be small and who are going to grow and going to be a bigger supplier to you in the future. So it should be a great opportunity for all of those small businesses as well to realize that there is a lot of opportunity. We haven't even spoken about skills development. But we're going to get
there. We're going to get there. We've still got another 40 minutes. But I think, Barushka, it segues into a lovely point that Lianne said about, and this is what I like about equity equivalent solutions. And Microsoft South Africa had quite a nice one, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, developing future users of its software and products.
Yeah.
And that to me is a wonderful win-win example how equity equivalent solutions can be found as well.
Absolutely. A number of multinationals have been perhaps scared off with regards to pursuing equity equivalence, because in the past it's taken a long time for them to actually come to fruition. But I know that the DTI is certainly looking at and certainly has indicated that they're willing to look at applications for equity equivalent programs going forward, and we've had a number of inquiries from clients in that regard. There certainly is opportunity there for multinationals to make a big impact in respect of enterprise and supply development in that regard.
Eben, what's important to consider when you're designing an EE type program?
Sorry, when you say
equity equivalent.
Yeah, I think from it's actually I was actually going to touch on a slightly different point, but I'll get back to your EE point, and it's just about the comment that Dion made about it not being necessarily a point. What's interesting to me is that the DTI are also adopting a more pragmatic approach. So you have this issue that you have a scorecard that you're trying to achieve, and there are players in there that measure you. But I know for a fact that the DTI, for example, are looking at the motor sector and saying that the 50 million rand cap on SME or EMEs, they're prepared to actually look at granting dispensation above that, because when you study law, you realize that as you get closer and closer to the line, it becomes increasingly more arbitrary, right? So, a company with 49 million rand turnover and a company with 51 million rand turnover, there's not much difference between them, except that one qualifies and one doesn't qualify. But I think in terms of equity equivalence, I think, again, there's a pragmatism that has to creep in or has to come in to ensure that we can't create an isolated South Africa. We are trying to attract foreign players in, and I mean, I've got a number of international investors, and if you're a German holding company around the world, you own the companies in your stable, and when that company happens to be in South Africa, you're not going to change that for South Africa, because that is and I don't think that that's something to be frowned at. It's just a reality of how people run their businesses globally, and so therefore, to some extent, South Africa has to look at what we're trying to do, the overarching objectives, and then also consider them in the context of the global economy, and then make sacrifices or adjustments or whatever you want to call them, so that we do get to a solution which works for South Africa and for the players that we're trying to attract into the country.
Well, it's good to hear that creeping pragmatism is coming in from both sides. I mean, one has to be absolutely fair here, because it's not just the fact that government has perhaps designed something in the past that's been unwieldy and maybe impractical, but also businesses' reluctance to really seize the nettle and see the strategic value to this. We just have to take a quick break from the panel, and when we return, we'll hone in on skills development. You're listening to Classic Business, which is brought to you by Inyosi Enterprise and Supply Development.
Sir, no one offers 9% interest on a fixed deposit account on a minimum of 10,000 rand.
She says Bidvest Bank offers 9% interest on a 12-month fixed deposit account if you're 55 or older.
And you won't get great rates on a 10,000 rand minimum deposit.
She says with Bidvest Bank you can get great rates on the 10,000 rand minimum deposit, no matter what your age.
SMS your name to 47068 for a callback. Bidvest Bank. Let's get it done. A licensed financial services and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
You wake up in a cold sweat. It's year end, and the company's BEE scorecard is your responsibility. To sleep easier, consider investing into Empowerment, an enterprise and supplier development solution. Inyosi provides companies with enterprise and supplier development BEE points annually for as long as they remain invested. So why not join the over 400 companies that have already invested in Inyosi Empowerment, and your company can earn BEE points and retain a balance sheet investment too. Now that's savvy investing from Inyosi Empowerment, the BEE specialists on www.inyosi.co.za.
Well, Welcome back. We're tying together all 5 elements of the revised codes of good practice, and it's a panel brought to you by Nyosi Enterprise and Supply Development. I've got quite a full studio tonight. I'm not used to having 5 on a panel, but it feels really festive, and we've got a few listening in the lobby outside as well. So quite a festive atmosphere, Classic FM tonight. I think, Evan, skills development must be one of the most critical developmental objectives of the Act. We know we just don't have a system that is producing the sort of skills through the public sector. It does seem that a lot of that responsibility through skills development is now almost shifting to the private sector.
Yeah, I think certainly in the course of the last 22 years since the event of democracy in South Africa, I do believe that South Africa has possibly foot-faulted on a lot of the training programs that we had, the technical colleges and stuff. I think South Africa used to be well known for its technical expertise, and so skills development is one of the facets of the code that tries to address the lack of basic skills. And obviously this ties into an education issue as well, etc., etc. And I think last night we were speaking to Tracy from the clothing bank, who indicated, just the extent to which the ladies that she works with lack the most basic skills, and so you really have to try and help them with planning, etc., and actually educate people and build on the skills. So I think the codes again have identified issues that exist at an operational level in business South Africa. We know we've got a vast amount of people, unemployed people, with relatively poor education. And how do we as a country look to try and take those people into the formal economy? And it actually is a recognition of that factor. The reality of the skills, and I'm sure the rest of the panel will talk to this, is it's a very difficult element. It's broken down into a number of different categories, but it, again, at a high level, at a strategic level, it makes a lot of sense. If you can upskill your personnel or your employees, then you can produce a higher value good. And I think probably for me the standout example of that, for example, is Germany. If you look at what happened to Germany in the 2008 crisis, instead of laying off, the Americans did. So the Americans followed quite a hard approach. They lay off lots of people and then they rehire as the companies come through.
Yep.
Germany have a very strong pact between labor and between government.
In the Mittelstadt.
That's right. And they basically, everyone takes a haircut on salaries and everyone works at 2/3 of a week or whatever it is. But the reason for that is they have a very highly skilled labor force and they don't want that labor force to exit. And because of that, Germany has been the forerunner in terms of pulling Europe back through the depression that it went through, or the recession that it went through. So I think, at a strategic level, you can understand why skills development is a priority element, and obviously the issue is, which we need to debate here, is what are solutions that companies can look to try and to achieve the skills development.
And Gary, what is the solution that you're providing?
You mean in terms of skills development?
Yes.
Well, so I don't want to, without going into too much detail. Obviously, the biggest challenge in dealing with the deaf community, whatever learnerships or whatever accreditation is available, is not really deaf friendly. So there is training at certain levels from deaf institutions, but it's so geared around a deaf environment that is not really practical in any real sense in the real world. So what we're looking to do is to create, beyond just barista training, it's general business sense. And Evan mentioned the clothing bank, very much along those models. You're dealing with a lot of similar issues. So we want to create a more holistic approach to learnerships and skills development, whereby the deaf communities can integrate into a business or into an environment with real skills that actually work and are practical to a solution.
And Dion, listening to this, you just are made aware of the complexity of challenge and the nuance involved in this. It's not like just send people out on training. And I know in the matrix of skills and development learning, the category F, which is informal training outside of the workplace by way of workshops and conferences that I think were over-conferenced, and category G, informal training that takes place at the workplace, have actually been capped at 15% collectively.
Correct.
So this is actually quite a challenge, because you as a company now have to think quite creatively about your training.
Well, I think that the point is that we need to rethink the notion of training. So for a lot of businesses, what they do is that they develop a service provider panel that is pre-approved. They then publish a list of training courses that panel provides, and then people select what training they want to go on during the year. Really what the codes subscribe and what they require for us to do is to be far more intentional around building capacity. So as opposed to looking at training, we look at capacity building. Let's take the issue of bursaries. Black students from a rural area are given a bursary, which typically covers their tuition, and it may cover some nominal expenses. What it doesn't cover is the fact that to live in an urban city, or Wits, or wherever the case may be, they need to socially integrate, and they need to economically integrate with their peers. We don't provide for that. So the fallout of black students often doesn't come from the fact that they're not coping in university. It comes from the fact that they're holding down 3 jobs, that they are deemed to be different from their peers in their classroom. They don't feel that they fit in, and when they qualify, if they qualify, they go back to where they come from, as opposed to being integrated back into the workplace, because we're not providing or designing solutions. And as Evan says, necessity is the mother of invention. The Germans have come up with a model that suits their economy. We need to innovate around models that suit our economy, and for as long as we throw training and expect recognition for participating in the transformation agenda, we're going to find it increasingly difficult. So we need to change our attitude. My question to clients often is, if I took a school leaver and I profiled a successful employee in our business, I took a school leaver and I put them on a 4-year learnership where they can do work a 30-hour week. For the balance of their time, they can do their qualification through a UNISA or somebody, so they don't necessarily have to attend full-time classes. At the end of that 4 years, they've got 4 years work experience. They've economically provided for themselves. They've been on a very structured internship and been allowed to not only socially but also academically and economically participate in the economy. We need to think differently.
Wonderful solutions there, and Lianne, I see you grinning from ear to ear, obviously agree with those, and we've got tax incentives at that level now supporting that.
Yeah, exactly. What I really liked about what Lianne was saying is that it's a very sustainable solution. It's a solution that is going to get people from bridging the gap from skills development into the economy, which is employment, that's your employment equity, and then hopefully one day onto ownership and obviously move up the ranks within the business. There's different solutions in terms of skills development that get you more benefit, and this is both from an economic point of view, and I'd also like to just point out from a points point of view, and that is obviously these learnerships. So these learnerships are going to get you a lot of BE points, plus now, I've got a love-hate relationship with the fact that South Africa has so many different laws, but there is a different law, and there's a law regarding tax incentives and the employment tax incentive. So basically what this is saying is if it is a CETA-accredited qualification, and specifically a learnership, you can actually get tax allowances. Now, that was 30,000 Rand per learner, and then a completion allowance of 30,000, and if in the case of a disabled learner, it was 50,000 and a completion allowance of 50,000 as well. That's actually gone up. To be correct, it's still with Treasury and they still need to make a decision on it, but it looks like that's going to increase quite substantially to 80,000 per able-bodied learner and 120,000 for a disabled learner. So it makes a lot of business sense. It obviously is providing a solution to South Africa that we desperately need. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, it makes business sense and it should be an opportunity that could be called a win-win from both sides.
Now, I'm probably going to be hauled over the coals by Kim Jurgensen and NEDAC for my next comment, but when COSATU who finally were coerced into accepting this, and it was a long process, unfortunately, and to go back to your point, Evan, we really need to recalibrate our relationships between business and labour to say we're in this boat together, and what we're striving for isn't necessarily two different things. Right. They're the same South Africa that we want ultimately for our children. Right. Varushka, innovation around skills development. What are some innovative models and solutions that you might have brought to market?
Michael, in fact, I don't deal with.
You're far more in the structuring.
That's much in the ownership space.
Evan, talk to me about and perhaps disabled learners here is a key one as well. And Gary, I'd like your input here because I think a lot of businesses I speak to say, well, we actually don't know how or where to access them.
Yeah, so I hear that a lot. You know, it's really interesting because disability in general is overlooked by a lot of businesses. I've been very fortunate in that Pick and Pay and South African breweries have got involved very early on in my business, and we're starting to create models that make it easier for businesses to engage with us. But I know generally, I've chatted to quite a few people the past couple of weeks who've come to me and said, we love what you're doing. We don't necessarily want to hire a deaf person, but where do we find disabled people? Where is this workforce? They're hidden, and I wish I had an answer for that. But for me, it's going to take. It's a shared value system. We've heard that the words bantered around this afternoon. Is that it's going to take a shared value. The corporates have to step up and integrate with companies like mine. I'm a very small player, but it's dealing with people doing what we're doing in that kind of space is going to find the solutions. I don't think the solutions exist, but they can be found together.
Evan?
Yeah, what I like about the model that Gary's put forward, and I think it ties into our previous discussion, is that the skills development training that he's looking to do is vocational training. So at the end of the day, if you are deaf or suffer some other handicap, unfortunately for you, you live in a world that's dominated by people who aren't handicapped. So unless you can fit into a normalized world, you are going to be marginalized. So the trick or the focus that needs to go in, and that this is what I really like about the trick.
Well, welcome back. We're tying together all 5 elements of the revised codes of good practice, and it's a panel brought to you by Nyosi Enterprise and Supply Development. I've got quite a full studio tonight. I'm not used to having 5 on a panel, but it feels really festive, and we've got a few listening in the lobby outside as well. So quite a festive atmosphere, Classic FM tonight. I think, Evan, skills development must be one of the most critical developmental objectives of the Act. We know we just don't have a system that is producing the sort of skills through the public sector. It does seem that a lot of that responsibility through skills development is now almost shifting to the private sector.
Yeah, I think certainly in the course of the last 22 years since the event of democracy in South Africa, I do believe that South Africa has possibly foot-faulted on a lot of the training programs that we had, the technical colleges and stuff. I think South Africa used to be well known for its technical expertise, and so skills development is one of the facets of the code that tries to address the lack of basic skills. And obviously this ties into an education issue as well, etc., etc. And I think last night we were speaking to Tracy from the clothing bank, who indicated, just the extent to which the ladies that she works with lack the most basic skills, and so you really have to try and help them with planning, etc., and actually educate people and build on the skills. So I think the codes again have identified issues that exist at an operational level in business South Africa. We know we've got a vast amount of people, unemployed people, with relatively poor education. And how do we as a country look to try and take those people into the formal economy? And it actually is a recognition of that factor. The reality of the skills, and I'm sure the rest of the panel will talk to this, is it's a very difficult element. It's broken down into a number of different categories, but it, again, at a high level, at a strategic level, it makes a lot of sense. If you can upskill your personnel or your employees, then you can produce a higher value good. And I think probably for me the standout example of that, for example, is Germany. If you look at what happened to Germany in the 2008 crisis, instead of laying off, the Americans did. So the Americans followed quite a hard approach. They lay off lots of people and then they rehire as the companies come through.
Yep.
Germany have a very strong pact between labor and between government.
In the Mittelstadt.
That's right. And they basically, everyone takes a haircut on salaries and everyone works at 2/3 of a week or whatever it is. But the reason for that is they have a very highly skilled labor force and they don't want that labor force to exit. And because of that, Germany has been the forerunner in terms of pulling Europe back through the depression that it went through, or the recession that it went through. So I think, at a strategic level, you can understand why skills development is a priority element, and obviously the issue is, which we need to debate here, is what are solutions that companies can look to try and to achieve the skills development.
And Gary, what is the solution that you're providing?
You mean in terms of skills development?
Yes.
Well, so, it's I don't want to, without going into too much detail, obviously the biggest challenge in dealing with the deaf community, whatever learnerships or whatever accreditation is available, is not really deaf-friendly. So, there is training at certain levels from deaf institutions, but it's so geared around a deaf environment that is not really practical in any real sense in the real world. So what we're looking to do is to create beyond just barista training, it's general business sense. And Evan mentioned the clothing bank, very much along those models. You're dealing with a lot of similar issues, so we want to create a more holistic approach to learnerships and skills development, whereby the deaf communities can integrate into a business or into an environment with real skills that actually work and are practical to a solution.
And Dion, listening to this, you just are made aware of the complexity of challenge and the nuance involved in this. It's not like just send people out on training. And I know in the matrix of skills and development learning, the category F, which is informal training outside of the workplace by way of workshops and conferences that I think were over-conferenced, and category G, informal training that takes place at the workplace, have actually been capped at 15% collectively.
Correct.
So this is actually quite a challenge, because you as a company now have to think quite creatively about your training.
Well, I think that the point is that we need to rethink the notion of training. So for a lot of businesses, what they do is that they develop a service provider panel that is pre-approved. They then publish a list of training courses that panel provides, and then people select what training they want to go on during the year. Really what the codes subscribe and what they require for us to do is to be far more intentional around building capacity. So as opposed to looking at training, we look at capacity building. Let's take the issue of bursaries. Black students from a rural area are given a bursary, which typically covers their tuition, and it may cover some nominal expenses. What it doesn't cover is the fact that to live in an urban city, or Wits, or wherever the case may be, they need to socially integrate, and they need to economically integrate with their peers. We don't provide for that. So the fallout of black students often doesn't come from the fact that they're not coping in university. It comes from the fact that they're holding down 3 jobs, that they are deemed to be different from their peers in their classroom. They don't feel that they fit in, and when they qualify, if they qualify, they go back to where they come from, as opposed to being integrated back into the workplace, because we're not providing or designing solutions. And as Evan says, necessity is the mother of invention. The Germans have come up with a model that suits their economy. We need to innovate around models that suit our economy, and for as long as we throw training and expect recognition for participating in the transformation agenda, we're going to find it increasingly difficult. So we need to change our attitude. My question to clients often is, if I took a school leaver and I profiled a successful employee in our business, I took a school leaver and I put them on a 4-year learnership where they can work a 30-hour week. For the balance of their time, they can do their qualification through a UNISA or somebody, so they don't necessarily have to attend full-time classes. At the end of that 4 years, they've got 4 years work experience. They've economically provided for themselves. They've been on a very structured internship and been allowed to not only socially but also academically and economically participate in the economy. We need to think differently.
Wonderful solutions there, and Lianne, I see you grinning from ear to ear. Obviously agree with those, and we've got tax incentives at that level now supporting that.
Yeah, exactly. What I really liked about what Dion was saying is that it's a very sustainable solution. It's a solution that is going to get people from bridging the gap from skills development into the economy, which is employment. That's your employment equity, and then hopefully one day onto ownership and obviously move up the ranks within the business. There's different solutions in terms of skills development that get you more benefit, and this is both from an economic point of view, and I'd also like to just point out from a points point of view, and that is obviously these learnerships. So these learnerships are going to get you a lot of BE points, plus now, I've got a love-hate relationship with the fact that South Africa has so many different laws, but there is a different law, and there's a law regarding tax incentives and the employment tax incentive. So basically what this is saying is if it is a CETA-accredited qualification, and specifically a learnership, you can actually get tax allowances. Now, that was 30,000 Rand per learner, and then a completion allowance of 30,000, and if in the case of a disabled learner, it was 50,000 and a completion allowance of 50,000. 50,000 as well. That's actually gone up. To be correct, it's still with Treasury and they still need to make a decision on it, but it looks like that's going to increase quite substantially to 80,000 per able-bodied learner and 120,000 for a disabled learner. So it makes a lot of business sense. It obviously is providing a solution to South Africa that we desperately need. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, it makes business sense and it should create opportunity that could be called a win-win from both sides.
Now, I'm probably going to be hauled over the coals by Kim Jurgensen at NEDLAC for my next comment, but when COSATU finally were coerced into accepting this, and it was a long process, unfortunately, and to go back to your point, Evan, we really need to recalibrate our relationships between business and labour to say we're in this boat together, and what we're striving for isn't necessarily two different things. Right. They're the same South Africa that we want ultimately for our children. Right. Varushka, innovation around skills development. What are some innovative models and solutions that you might have brought to market?
Michael, in fact, I don't deal with.
You're far more in the structuring.
Very much in the ownership space.
Evan, talk to me about and perhaps disabled learners here is a key one as well. And Gary, I'd like your input here because I think a lot of businesses I speak to say, well, we actually don't know how or where to access them.
Yeah, so I hear that a lot. You know, it's really interesting because disability in general is overlooked by a lot of businesses. I've been very fortunate in that Pick and Pay and South African breweries have got involved very early on in my business, and we're starting to create models that make it easier for businesses to engage with us. But I know generally, I've chatted to quite a few people the past couple of weeks who've come to me and said, we love what you're doing. We don't necessarily want to hire a deaf person, but where do we find disabled people? Where is this workforce? They're hidden, and I wish I had an answer for that. But it's for me, it's going to take. It's a shared value system. We've heard that the words bantered around this afternoon. Is that it's going to take a shared value. The corporates have to step up and integrate with companies like mine. I'm a very small player, but it's dealing with people doing what we're doing in that kind of space is going to find the solutions. I don't think the solutions exist, but they can be found together.
Evan?
Yeah, what I like about the model that Gary's put forward, and I think it ties into our previous discussion, is that the skills development training that he's looking to do is vocational training. So you know, at the end of the day, if you are deaf or suffer some other handicap, unfortunately for you, you live in a world that's dominated by people who aren't handicapped. So unless you can fit into a normalized world, you are going to be marginalized. So the trick or the focus that needs to go in, and that this is what I really like about what Gary's done, is he's gone and identified something which doesn't necessarily require the sense of hearing, because if you're a barista and you've got a limited number of things in terms of coffee and whatever, double latte, whatever it is, there isn't really, it's not a huge list for you. So, and also if you think about a barista, when you're ordering your coffee, you're typically facing them and they can lip read you. So it's an easy to use, and if you think about it from that perspective, it's a very clever solution. And if you are a barista, typically you need to have a good sense of smell. Now, most people who lose a sense, they often gain in other senses. So, and it's another example of the kind of innovation that will come to the fore when there's an opportunity. And Gary's a classic example of someone who's looked at that and started to join the dots. And what companies can do is that companies can go back to the scorecard and back to their needs and back to their strategic objectives and say, right, this is what there is out there. Maybe I can get involved in that and benefit from that. And the economy, the deaf barista or whatever it is that Gary's working on, can also benefit from that. So hence the sharing. But for me, it's critically important that the skills development is vocational skills development. We need to increase the number of people who have been marginalized. South Africa, we often talk about having a two-tier of economy, those that are excluded from the formalized economy and those that are included, and we need to expand it. I can remember very clearly as when I started working for an audit firm, I was struck by the office environment. It was it took me a while to understand how people react to each other and how they deal with each other, and a level of professionalism that you need to adopt in an office environment, which you don't have at home and you don't have at school and you don't have at varsity. And we need to help people to understand that.
There's a terrible business jargon buzzword called onboarding, but that's exactly what we need to do. And also, to a point we mentioned last night, Lianne, that when you give an opportunity to someone, that first job opportunity, they tend to stay employed. They tend to stay on the ladder. Right. So we have the ability out there. And back to your point about a mindset, the opportunities are there if we're looking for opportunities and not looking at this as a threat.
Completely. I don't know any business in the world that doesn't benefit from a well-trained, qualified, and deeply entrenched workforce. So if this is what capacity building in our environment gives us, then why wouldn't we invest in it? And I think that it's also the issue of supply and demand. As a business philosophy, the more supply I have, I need to find black consulting engineers, and I keep hearing from people we can't find them. They don't exist. Well, I don't know that that's 100% true. If we continue to recruit in exactly the same ways and expect to achieve a different result, we're going to be conflicted. We're going to be challenged. We had a customer a few years back who said, I need black veterinary scientists. If you can find them, I'll hire them. So never one to shy away from a challenge. We said, no problem. And we went and spoke to Honest to Put, which frankly any one of the executives in that company could. The reality was that the black veterinary scientists, when they qualified, went back to the farm. They came from farming environments. Well, they weren't reading the 100,000 Rand huge big ad on the back of the Sunday Times every Sunday because they were sitting on the farm. So if you continue to recruit, develop in exactly the same way, our organizations are never going to transform. We need to transform our thinking.
Einstein's definition of insanity, doing things the same way and expecting a different result each time around. Well, we have to do one thing the same way, and that's break for an ad. You're listening to Classic Business, brought to you by Inyosi Enterprise and Supply Development.